Hello and welcome to the video. This is an update on these things here. Now this is the fat chart version of the Walksnail system. Now I've had this for quite a while. I got it about 5 months ago and I did an update talking about what it was like after flying with it for 2 months, and now I've been flying with it over winter as well. So there's 5 months under my belt and there's been an awful lot of firmware updates and changes. And as we're coming into spring, I know for many analog pilots out there, and 60% of my audience last time I did a poll are actually analog only pilots, lots of you out there are looking for what do I invest in, what do I buy? And it's tricky, right? Because we have lots of different choice. You've got the DJI older system, the version 1, you've got the new version 203 base systems, you've got things like Walksnail, you've got things like HD0. Which one do you spend your money on? Now, I've been flying HD for a long time. I started flying HD back in 2017, I think it was. I started playing with the Connex ProSight system. So I've been flying HD for a long time, well before DJI came out with their goggles. And despite what people will tell you, there is no perfect HD system. There are lots of camps, and the members of those camps will vigorously defend their decision to invest in one of the HD systems and why that one's better or best. But as I've talked about in other videos, better and best is an exceedingly subjective term. What's best for me isn't probably going to be best for you, and vice versa. So this review is going to try and put as much context around what I found with this, the way I fly, the kind of pilot that I am, so that you can make your mind up with a little bit more than just, oh, that's rubbish, this is better. Because actually, the majority of people who are going to be buying this stuff aren't the guys and gals who've already bought the DJI system or invested in HD0 or something else. It's going to be analog pilots who are looking to move up into the world of HD and want something that's going to work. Now, I have the 3 main systems. I have the DJI system, I have the Walksnail system, obviously, and I have the HD0 system here as well. However, when I'm going to the field, I have 2 cases behind me, one of which has my DJI stuff in, which also has the FPV controller in there, because that's how I use it. The other bag now has my Walksnail goggles and my radio. I finally changed all of the remaining models that I fly that aren't DJI into Walksnail. So things like the Dolphin has been migrated, but the last thing was actually the ZOHD Dart, and that's now Walksnail as well. And why is that? Why am I flying the DJI and the Walksnail stuff more than the HD0 stuff? Well, it just suits the way that I fly and the models that I have here. So let me remind you very quickly of what I fly here, because I'm not just a quad pilot. I fly whoops, quads, wings, planes. I also have a couple of boats, as you can see behind me, and the odd radio control car as well. So it's a pretty broad church here. And I like to put systems in there that will kind of suit the model rather than trying to shoehorn something that wasn't designed for that into that space. However, I have been using a lot of the one-less Walksnail boards in places they probably weren't designed to go in because they're so small and lightweight. I'm not a racer. Although I like speed, I'm not doing the freestyle flippy-floppy and flying through gates, so I'm not interested in super low latency, which is one of the big benefits of the HD0 system. I'm also a massive fan of FPV. I've been flying FPV for longer than I care to admit. And I really like fixed wing FPV as well. So I particularly like those systems that fit easily and nicely into something like a plane or a wing. So this is why my videos have been less about, oh, let's do a comparison between the DJI image and the Walksnail image and the HD0 and all that kind of stuff. Because actually, the differences between them are getting smaller and smaller, and there may be key differences like that latency thing with HD0, where if you're a racer, that might be the most important thing to you. But in terms of the image, it is significantly better than the best analog image. And I know I spent a lot of money on high-end analog stuff, which is all now kind of gathering dust behind me. And that is because a HD image is just so much clearer. and you don't necessarily always notice it trying with analog and going to HD. You definitely notice it coming the other way around, where you've been flying with your HD goggles and you try a bit of analog and you're like, oh, blimey, this is horrible, even with really high-end cameras, VTXs and goggles. So why do I like Walksnail? Why is it the one at the moment that I put in my planes? One of the big reasons is the much higher levels of community engagement. And a lot of these points I'm about to make, you could actually make for the HD0 system as well. I'm not a fan of the way that DJI is relatively closed off. I love the fact that Walksnail have worked with the community and are listening, taking feedback and working to address suggestions, feedback, bug reports and those things. And I've seen that consistently over the last 5 months, and that gives me a lot of comfort. It means that they've not just dropped this into the market, dropped the mic and walk off stage, and it's up to the community to figure out how everything's going to work. WTF OS being a great example. They are actually working to give us the functionality that we want straight out the box. I like the fact that this is also a much more open system. So this, for example, will let you put your own custom fonts on here. So I think it's the sneaky FPV fonts I've got on it at the moment, which are beautiful, an amazing job. I'll put a link down below to those if you want to get them. But things like the OSD tool that I looked at recently, where you can add your OSD back in, all that stuff is being enabled and supported by that open approach to the market from the Walksnail and Fatshark teams. I'm also happy that there's lots of different versions of the avatar unit available, not just the light and the full fat version, but I've got this one. This is still in the cellophane. This is for the next build that I want to do, but there's also the smaller versions as well, the 1S versions, both the mini, the super small lightweight one, and kind of the regular 1S one as well. I've used all of them and they've all performed really well. This one's a little bit nicer with the 2 antennas, but you pay the price with that little bit of extra size and the little bit of extra weight. And I also like the fact that there are lots of different options to get into Walksnail. You don't have to buy the goggles. These are about £550. You can also get the Recon HD goggles that not a lot of people seem to talk about, which are about £280. Or you can get the VRX unit and put it on your own goggles for about £200. The issue, of course, with using your own goggles, if you have nice analog goggles, is that the performance of the system is kind of limited by the displays that are in the existing analog goggles that you have, and you also get a little bit of extra delay thanks to the HDMI output from the module and input into the goggles. For me, if I was starting out now, I would probably think about the Recon HD goggles very seriously. The Recon HD goggles I think were fantastic anyway. The analog versions were spectacular. One of my friends has them because he tried about 10 different FPV goggles. I kind of took a whole bootload of goggles round so he could try them out, and those were the ones that he loved over every other single version. They are underestimated how good they are, and now there's that Walksnail version which works straight out the box. So let's talk about why it is that I like Walksnail, because all that stuff we've talked about is not about the technology, it's more about the community-based stuff. I like Walksnail because I can decide between 720p and 1080p, that's all there in the box. I like the fact that it uses variable latency, so as you get further away, the latency increases slightly to preserve the image and also, importantly for me, preserve the on-screen display. There's also the fact that with the HD0 and the Walksnail system, both have been tested by other pilots than me, and they've both got over 30 kilometers. So although I'm never going to fly that far, because quite frankly it's not legal to in the UK, if you really want to, then you can get a very, very long way away with this system. I like the way that it just works. It's not difficult. There's a bind button on these. There's a bind button on the avatar units, and the setup is really easy. You don't have to plug it into a PC and activate it and report back to the mothership in order for everything to work. And as a pilot coming from the analog side, that makes the setup and doing everything an awful lot easier. And I've heard recently of pilots who have had issues with the technology getting support from Walksnail, with them sending out replacement VRX units when things happen. And that is a great sign as well. I've always been a fan of the Fatshark warranty, which has been fantastic. So when your very expensive technology breaks, they'll help you out. but it also appears that that methodology is also in the Walksnail's camp as well. So if you buy this and it goes wrong, you're not going to be on your own and have a really expensive doorstop. Now, as I said in the beginning, no system is perfect. The DJI system isn't perfect, the HD0 system isn't perfect, and these aren't either. And that's because I have a set of requirements that I would like as a user and as pilots, and they don't tick all the boxes. There's only a handful of things at the moment that I'm still waiting for. So there are a couple of things that I'd like to see from the system over the next 5 months. First and foremost is more options for the avatar units. Again, there's several available right now. I would like to see a smaller, more compact version of this so that there is more options, ideally with the options for a longer cable between the avatar unit and the camera. That would make it far more versatile. I'd also like to see cheaper avatar units coming out as well, because one of the things that's not really talked about is that although getting into the Walksnail system is about the same price at the moment as high-end analog, and to be honest, most of the HD systems are in the kind of same price bracket, the way it scales is a lot different. So you might spend £60–70 per model to put the analog system in it. So a nice camera, a really nice VTX, nice antenna. That's going to, if you have 10 models that you're going to FPV, if you say that was £60 a model for simple math, that's going to be £600. However, for a Walksnail avatar unit, these things are anywhere between 110 and 150. So if you're buying them for 150, 10 of those is 1,500. So it's a lot more expensive. So I would love to see some cheaper options for those pilots coming in from analog land to help them convert their fleets over to Walksnail. I'd also really like a spectator mode. It's something that is coming. I have had it confirmed that they are working on it. This is something that's been in some of the other systems where if your friend has another set of goggles, that you can just have two sets of goggles looking at the same air unit. That would be very handy, and apparently it's on its way, but it can't come soon enough because more of my friends are starting to get the system. I would like more uniform support in the on-screen display from the flight controller firmware. This is less about Walksnail because the on-screen display support in here is very, very good, but I'd like to have the same kind of features and functionality irrespective of whether it's a Beastfly, iNav or Ardu Pilot Quad, and I would like a little bit more customization in the goggles of how things like the subtitles work, the bits along the bottom. But these are kind of relatively small gripes, really. The system itself is pretty solid. It would be nice to have an analog input in goggles in the future, but you know what? Once you've made the change, going and flying analog just feels like you're trying to watch a movie on a 10-inch black and white TV in the kitchen when you were a kid. So, in summary, 5 months on, having put this thing through its paces, would I recommend it? Absolutely, a very big yes. If I were more bothered about the super low latency of HD0 and was doing more of that very high speed flying very close to objects, HD0 might have got my vote instead for the way that I fly. As someone who doesn't like to be restricted by the technology, I found the Walksnail system is very good and very versatile. I've been able to put it in all the models that I want to with a little bit of thought. It's always gone in. I also like the fact that the hardware keeps coming out. This doesn't feel like a flash in the pan, and this was one of the big concerns back in the early days. Is this going to be something that comes out that then, in 6 months' time, you can't buy it anymore? And some of us who took the plunge early on, that was a risk. However, 5 months on, the fact that they're bringing out new technology makes me feel very comfortable about recommending it, and that this is going to be around for quite a long time. And I think it's important to remember that all of the stuff that's happened with Walksnail, with the promotion, the firmware updates, the support, the community, all that stuff that's been going on has been happening without a key part of the 3 businesses involved in this system actually working on it very much at all. The 3 people are going to be Cadix, Walksnail and Fat Shark. Fat Shark have been in limbo for quite a while. There's currently a sale of Fat Shark going through. And in fact, speaking to some of the people at Fat Shark, they're incredibly excited about moving away from Red Cat, because under Red Cat, they weren't really allowed to do what they wanted to do. Fat Shark engineers actually did design these goggles. These are Fat Shark goggles, and I talked about that originally, but in terms of all the other bits and pieces that they would normally do to help promote and invest in this technology, they've not really been able to, because they've been in that limbo state. So all this has happened in the last 5 months, with Fat Shark basically sat on the bench looking at their feet, chewing gum, and it's going to be exciting when they get to come back on the field and join the play. Stay tuned. I will be getting a VRX unit in. It's one of the only pieces of the technology of this I haven't tried. They're making VRX units, another batch, and I've got one on order. And I'm going to do something a little bit unusual. I'm going to use it with a friend of mine who's an analog pilot, and we'll have an unbiased, unvarnished view of what it's like flying nice analog versus what it's like flying with Walksnail. And that video is absolutely aimed at all of you analog pilots out there who are looking at the technology with this, with HD0, with DJI, and trying to make up their mind. Hopefully that will give an unbiased, honest view of what it's like moving from analog to something like Walksnail. So stay tuned for that, and hopefully that's been interesting for those of you that have been watching the videos over the past 4 or 5 months and are looking to maybe spend some pennies on a system. If you have any questions, then do pop them down below, and I do my best to provide answers. Thank you for spending your time today watching that video. You can find me in all the usual places on social media, and if you're trying to learn about a subject, then check out the playlist. All of my videos are organized into easy to follow playlists that, if you're trying to learn a topic, will take you from the basics right the way through to some pretty advanced stuff.